What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk to you about SoFi. I want to go over some of the data points, break it down on what really moved it, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So SoFi seemed like it was on steroids today. Went up 1.1%, new 52-week high of 21.86. Absolute crazy stuff. 20.75 the low, 21.86, like I said, was kind of the high. 91.2 million shares being traded, 74 is the average. So not only, for the most part, was the market bleeding because of Trump and seems to be very focused on tariffs, and normally that would have really significantly impacted SoFi, caused it to go down. But like I said, SoFi, there's a whole new level of FOMO that's been kind of surrounding it. No official news from SoFi though today, no SEC filings or anything like that. Even on a macro standpoint, there wasn't really any data points. One Fed speaker, Goolsbee, kind of said that these recent tariffs could potentially delay rate cuts. And again, even that comment normally in the past would really negatively impact SoFi, but it didn't really phase it whatsoever. So yeah, very interesting stuff. When it comes down to going into this upcoming week, options, there was 160,000 in the money options. So I'll start off by going over that. Today there was 86 million in calls, 17 million in puts. 45% of all the options being done were optimistic and bullish in nature. So at the end of the day, you are seeing a whole new sense of optimism still surrounding SoFi, despite it continuously hitting 52-week highs. So I think people are still anticipating for it to continue to move higher. This is the open interest. So popping over here, you do have a lot at the 1450, so roughly 1,000 there, 5,000 and so forth. Big one though is you have 80,000 at that 1650. So this is where I've seen some people kind of comment on that, on how potentially that will cause it to really push higher. In my opinion, I think that market makers already started to cover that in the last couple of trading days. This is why SoFi, for kind of unexplained reasons, SoFi was just trending higher, abnormal amount of buying. And so I feel like market makers were covering behind the scenes, because it was fair to assume that when SoFi was at 20 and 19, it wasn't going to dip below 1650. So market makers might as well start covering already. So I feel like majority of that was already done. I could be wrong though. We'll have to wait and see come Monday. But a couple big ones though. You have 14,000 at that 20, 24,000 at that 21. So definitely that should, in among itself, just those few will make for a very interesting next going into next week. So a nice push higher. And you do see some abnormal transactions on the dark pool after hours. So maybe that might be already market makers covering some of that, but very small amounts. So 3.2 million for there, 1.1, 2.7. So maybe, like I said, some institutions and market makers are covering, but yeah, that definitely does not kind of jive or make up for the majority of that. So should make for a very interesting Monday. When it comes to shorts, they eventually admitted defeat. They returned 113,000 shares. They were, first thing though, increasing 1.1 million. So as SoFi decided just to kind of break through a lot of the key resistance levels and just move on higher, shorts were trying to slow it. Didn't really work. They eventually gave up and returned net 113, like I said. 14.31% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 155.32 million shares overall are being shorted. So yeah, this is a very interesting period going into SoFi's upcoming earnings. You have shorts from this kind of green line right here really doubling down. So they are trying their very best to slow the progress of SoFi. So they're very reactive to the stock price, but clearly I think this upcoming earnings is going to be probably the biggest deal of ever, like in SoFi's history, because it is either going to cause a significant sell-off. Obviously shorts will just double down and kind of cause a further pullback, or this will either cause the biggest squeeze into like the 25 or potentially higher range. So yeah, very exciting times are ahead, a lot more volatility, but I think given the circumstances, FOMO and just whatever else, like SoFi is kicking ass and taking names. And keep in mind, I think the big thing that has been really surrounding SoFi is a lot of the recent updates associated to SoFi Invest and potentially crypto. Crypto hasn't really even launched yet. So I think once that does kind of get off the ground, that will also really push SoFi higher. So yeah, big things, like I said, are coming down the pipeline despite the crazy volatility and tariffs and everything else. But moving on from here, with it closing at 21.20, it is trading between this R3 and this R2. So in comparison to a lot of growth stocks, it's definitely outperforming that. So 2034 is a strong support. Wasn't even tested whatsoever today. So despite the massive bloodbath, it wasn't even tested. During the overnight it was, but obviously that didn't really amount to too much. 2257 is going to be that key point to really watch for in the next couple trading days, so going into next week, because if it does break above that, then essentially the next strong kind of target will be $28. That would be rather crazy going into SoFi's upcoming earnings around that $28 range. So I don't want to give false hope. That is a little bit far-fetched, but you never know. Things are very much heating up with SoFi. One thing also did come out, though, that's really helped SoFi move higher was a new analyst rating. I know I complain about this all the time. Doesn't make sense why analysts give ratings leading into their earnings, but honestly, SoFi was able to kind of get away from the curse, because normally there's always been bearish ratings leading into the earnings and causes SoFi to pull back. But market just said F you to Morgan Stanley, KBW, even Bank of America, and I guess even JP Morgan as well. But there was TD Cowen initiated coverage, $21 price target, and this analyst does have a very good success rating. 71%. So pretty good stuff. That did raise the average. So right now, over the last 3 months, the average is 1596. That does represent a 24.72% downside. So there's a couple stocks I've covered in the past. One was Palantir, and I've openly stated that Wall Street does not kind of understand innovative companies, because for the most part, Palantir, as it was really going higher and higher, you've always had this kind of negative downside anticipated from analysts. So I think SoFi now is starting to get to that same level as Palantir, that analysts just do not understand SoFi's true potential. You have a couple ones out there, of course, with some higher ratings, but still you have 11 and 13 and 13. They just are so narrow-minded. So yeah, what's your viewpoint on that? Aside from that, though, no real articles, which is rather odd. I would have anticipated a lot more kind of articles to kind of talk about SoFi. There's a couple that just go over the technicals, but I think they're just more AI driven. No real kind of bare bones or anything like that to that, the articles. Aside from that, though, on the actual chart, there's nothing negative to really bring up aside from it being overbought. And this is something I've kind of mentioned time and time again. So with it being overbought as well as the broader market, first sign of weakness, you're going to see a lot of negative volatility, some consolidation. And for pretty much the most part, majority of the stocks in the market did get hit by that today, being overbought. And with Trump talking, it caused some consolidation. So a lot of stocks went down between like 2 and 4%. SoFi just said, F you, I'm going to go higher. So honestly, that potentially could impact going into next week because we have a lot of big companies unveiled in their earnings, a lot of big data points. Stay tuned for my weekend video where I go over some expectations and everything. But this week was absolutely phenomenal. So popping over here, over the last 5 days, it went up 14.63%. Over the last 1 month, up 43.73%. And then over the last 6 months, up 50.68%. And this is why I stated when it was at like 15 or 16, or it might have been a little bit, maybe 17, definitely, if you are going to be one of those individuals that sells covered calls, if you still do believe SoFi is going to continue to move higher, I would kind of hold off on that, only because a lot of people do get burned by that. I've seen that in the comments already when SoFi was running up, and especially I think this was a killer, June the 30th, when it did dip. A lot of people started to sell covered calls, and then SoFi just said, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to continue to go higher. A lot of people had a lot of their shares kind of taken away because of that, or either you just have to buy back your options and kind of it's a little bit more of a loss that way. So let me know your thoughts on SoFi. I think overall pretty good, successful way to end the week for SoFi. Maybe not the broader market, but we don't really care about that for this video. So hopefully everyone has a good weekend. One final thing though, pop over to my Patreon. I do give buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.